John Stanton Timber's eyewitness account unveils disturbing truths of Custer's last stand. John Stanton Timber, a Northern Cheyenne elder, historian, and storyteller, played a crucial role in safeguarding the legacy and culture of his people. Born on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Montana, he grew up immersed in the tales of his ancestors, including those of his grandfather, who survived the Battle of Little Bighorn. John devoted his life to keeping these stories alive, collaborating with historians and anthropologists, ensuring the history of the Northern Shoshone people was not forgotten. His efforts remain vital in understanding the true perspective of his people during the turbulent times of the late 1800s. Now, before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe to help support our community. The clash between General George Custer's troops and the Cheyenne people on June 25, 1876, didn't take the Cheyenne off guard. As some might believe, they were aware that soldiers were nearby. Hunting for them, the Cheyenne knew trouble was coming, though not exactly when lame white man. My grandfather warned my grandmother the day before the fight that scouts had spotted soldiers along the Rosebud. When they traveled downriver, they saw a steamboat bringing supplies on the Yellowstone. The group led by White Man Bear was on their way to the Black Hills when they encountered the soldiers. But instead of retreating, they pressed on and met more scouts with fresh news. Words spread quickly, and soon native forces began gathering at Little Horn. The soldiers weren't left in the dark either. A Crow Scout white man runs him, informed the Cheyenne that they were being watched, sending daily reports to Custer. With both sides aware of each other's presence, the Sioux leaders gathered and sent word to all the chiefs. They sought to decide whether to engage with the soldiers or speak with them first. Maybe they're not just here to send us back to the reservation, they considered. If the soldiers were willing to talk peacefully, they'd listen, but if not, they were prepared to defend their people. The leaders appointed the military societies to guard the camp, preventing lone warriors from charging out to confront the soldiers early. While it was a great honor to be the first to face the enemy, the Sioux and Cheyenne societies did not want premature actions. As night approached, the guards rode out to their posts, positioning themselves at 10 or 15 stations across both sides of the river, keeping a close watch over the camp. Their presence could be seen on the hills as the sun set, their vigilance clear. Yet some young men had other plans that night. My step-grandfather's friend Bigfoot approached him, saying, "Wolftooth, we could sneak through, maybe others will follow, and we'll meet the enemy on the Rosebud." Watching the guards, they planned their escape. After the patrols began, they led their horses far west of the river, hobbled them for the night, and returned to camp once darkness fell. They quietly retrieved their horses and crossed the river, hiding in the brush until dawn. Back in camp, excitement was rising. A group of Sioux boys had taken the suicide vow, committing to fight until their last breath in the coming battle. The Cheyenne had started this tradition, and the Sioux adopted it, calling the ceremony dying dancing. That night, as the Sioux boys took their vows, Cheyenne warriors like Little Whirlwind, Cut Belly, Closed Hand, and Noisy Walking also pledged their lives. Each would fall the next day at dawn. The camp paraded the boys who had taken the suicide vow. My grandmother, twin woman, told me of this custom. Old men would announce, "Look at these boys. They won't return after the next battle." As the boys marched through the Cheyenne camp before heading back to their village. However, just as the parade ended, cries rang out soldiers had arrived. Families scrambled to flee, chaos spreading through the camp. Amid the turmoil, Yellow Robe found himself without a horse, but he caught a half-broke colt and galloped across the hills. Meanwhile, lame white man joined Tall Sioux in a sweat lodge, but the urgency forced him out. With only his blanket, moccasins, belt, and gun, he fled with my grandmother westward, rejoining the warriors as the soldiers pressed in. Wolftooth and Bigfoot emerged from their hiding spots. They spotted Indian patrols atop the hills, waiting until they were sure it was safe to move. Gathering with 50 other warriors, they planned their next steps. Just as they were ready, a rider appeared on a distant ridge, signaling for them to come back. Recognizing him as a fellow warrior, they rushed toward him, discovering the soldiers had already moved toward the village. This group of Cheyenne and Sioux warriors decided to follow the soldiers, cutting them off. They used their knowledge of the land to stay hidden, and after a short skirmish, they retreated back to the hills. The soldiers cautiously advanced down to where the current cemetery lies. From there 40 or 50 warriors gathered and began firing at them from the monument ridge. But the soldiers pressed on, aiming for the river. The final moments of Custer's men were filled with confusion, pride, and desperation as they reached the riverbank. The Cheyenne warriors, including Hanging Wolf, were ready. From the brush they opened fire, dismounting soldiers and forcing their retreat. Many more Cheyenne and Sioux warriors kept crossing the river as the soldiers tried to make their way back up toward the ridge. Hanging Wolf believed the soldiers could have slipped between the river and the ridge to regroup with Reno's men. But their delay allowed more warriors to gather behind the large ridge where the monument now stands, joining Wolf Tooth and his band. Meanwhile, Wolf Tooth and his warriors positioned themselves along the ridge, overlooking the soldiers. Custer's forces moved into the basin below the monument, with the Gray Horse Company dismounting to fight on foot. Had it not been for the numerous warriors above, they might have retreated that way, either during the early fighting or later, when things became more desperate to join Reno. But the ridge was teeming with fighters, and gunfire intensified from the other side as well. While most of the Cheyennes were engaged in the battle against Custer, a few were with the Sioux at Reno's fight. Beaver Heart witnessed Reno's men nearing the village before making a desperate stand in the trees. After crossing the river, they were nearly wiped out. Many struggled to cross the river, with the steep banks proving treacherous. Horses slipped, and soldiers were picked off as they attempted to scramble to safety. The survivors eventually made it to what's now called Reno Hill, where they regrouped exhausted and battered. Gunfire and war cries filled the air, and a heavy scent of smoke and sweat clung to the battleground. Around this time, Custer was leading a charge toward the Cheyenne camp. Keeping track of both battles was difficult as warriors moved between them. Most headed for the Custer fight after Reno's men dug in on the hill. Wolf Tooth remembered them, firing at Custer's troops from the ridge, using the terrain for cover. The battle's intensity continued to grow as Sioux cries began calling out, instructing warriors to prepare for the arrival of the Suicide Boys, who would charge from the river. Their charge would be the signal for the warriors above to engage in close combat, crowding the soldiers so they wouldn't have a chance to fire. Though most of the Cheyennes didn't understand the Sioux language, the message was relayed through translation. The Suicide Boys were the last to join the fight. They rode out from below and galloped toward the level ground where the museum now stands. Some charged at the soldiers' loose gray horses, while others charged directly into the soldiers' position. They initiated the hand-to-hand fighting, sacrificing themselves in the process. With their arrival, the warriors above, including Wolf Tooth's men, rushed in from the other side, leaving the soldiers no time to react or reload. Chaos reigned as warriors and soldiers clashed in brutal combat. Some soldiers attempted to flee along the ridge, but were quickly cut down by crossfire. The battlefield became a mess of bodies, warriors, soldiers, and horses entangled in a chaotic melee. The close-quarters fighting was so intense that soldiers unable to reload their pistols were at a disadvantage against warriors wielding clubs and hatchets. Among the Cheyenne, the tale of Yellow Nose, a brave warrior, became legend. In the thick of battle, Yellow Nose saw an American flag standing in the sagebrush and used it to count coup on a soldier. A brave and symbolic act that was told and retold in Cheyenne gatherings. He, along with others, would share their stories in special dances and gatherings recalling the fierce struggle they faced as the battle neared its end. Warriors recounted that, if not for the bold charge of the Suicide Boys, the outcome might have mirrored Reno's fight, where the soldiers fought from a distance. But Custer's battle was different, with the close-quarters combat tipping the scales. There were many tales of the battle's aftermath. Some wondered if Custer could have retreated to join Reno had he not hesitated on the ridge. Others questioned who delivered the fatal blow to Custer. But in the chaos of hundreds of bullets flying, it was impossible to know for sure. After the battle, Tall Bull, my grandmother's brother, came to retrieve my grandfather, lame white man who had fallen in the fight. Sadly, lame white man had been mistaken for a scout and scalped by the Sioux. Alongside him lay Noisy walking. These two, along with the young warriors from the Suicide Boys, were among the few Cheyenne whose deaths were marked. The Cheyenne dead were buried across the river, near where the railroad tracks now lie. We later found what we believe was their resting place, a grave adorned with hides and old belongings, marking the spot where their spirits returned to the Great Plains. Lame white man, a notable Cheyenne figure, fell in battle here, although not a leader in the traditional sense. Cheyenne chiefs typically stayed behind, but he chose to stand shoulder to shoulder with the warriors. Wooden Leg, a Cheyenne warrior, wrote about my grandfather's death. Though his account contained mistakes, he claimed to have recognized the body by the shirt and bonnet, but lame white man was dressed only in a blanket and moccasins. He didn't even have time to braid his hair, which led the Sioux to mistake him for a scout and scalp him later. Wooden Leg corrected some of his errors, including his claim that soldiers were killing each other. I, along with 2 army men, spoke to him, and he acknowledged that the soldiers fought hard, though vastly outnumbered. He explained that the high number of Indian casualties was due to the overwhelming number of warriors, not the soldiers' drunkenness. After the battle, many Indians revisited the battlefield to recover their fallen or gather items from the soldiers. I never could say for certain who was responsible for mutilating the bodies, though some who lost family at Sand Creek might have sought revenge. Items like coats and caps were taken, but pants and shoes were left behind. Some admitted to taking things, while others denied any involvement. I once asked my grandmother if she had gone to the battlefield, as women often accompanied men. She told me that the fight with Reno's unit was still raging and many women feared approaching, worrying that soldiers might break through. She was also preoccupied with tending to my grandfather's body. I believe many truths of that time were left unspoken, especially concerning what was done to the soldiers' bodies. White Wolf, known as Shot in the Head, was part of the fight, and mentioned that young men later collected silver and paper money. 2 men said they placed the loot in saddlebags, hiding them in pockets of the sand rocks near Reno Creek. They stood on their horses, pushed the bags into the crevices, and the treasure may still be there. If not already found, we once searched the area, but time was short after the battle. A large sum of money was found, though its fate remains unclear. Wandering Medicine, who was just a boy, then recounted how he and others found green paper, money and silver in the soldiers' pockets. They used the paper for saddle blankets on their mud horses and crafted silver buckles. Clothing was repurposed into leggings or coats, and Wolf Tooth used part of a boot as a bag for his gun tools, which was buried with him. Visiting his grave, I found only some spent shells nearby, the bag already gone. An old man had a saddle from the battle, made in the Indian way, with stirrups from a soldier's gear. Other items such as canteens and guns were taken and kept long after the reservation was established. In 1880, for White Bull once posed with a gun he seized from a soldier, later sold to a trader. Wooden Leg was also photographed with a captured weapon. More battle sites should be marked from the Indian side. Over the years, I've heard many tales and marked several places myself, though they've grown harder to find. I try to show others these spots and pass along the stories so they aren't lost. One site is on Reno Field, where a young Sioux boy charged the soldier line and was killed following an older warrior whose brother had fallen at Rosebud. Another marks where Low Dog and Little Son took down a fleeing soldier. Between the 2 battles, Low Dog, an expert shooter, dismounted and struck the soldier as he crossed a knoll. The large camp disbanded the following day, with some leaving for Lodge Grass. Some warriors remained to continue skirmishing with Reno, but they knew other soldiers were nearby, and resources were running low. The camp soon scattered, following various paths along the rivers. My grandmother, who joined the Cheyennes heading to Lodge Grass, shared a lighter story. The Cheyennes and Sioux held a parade, dressing in captured uniforms, riding gray horses, and even blowing a bugle. White Elk's horse, given to my grandmother, was borrowed for the parade, making for an impressive sight. Spotted Hawk described the men donning blue uniforms, hats, and carrying flags, but without pants. That morning, parade was followed by a victory dance at night before they moved on to prepare for the coming winter. I've heard many stories of the battle from different men: Wolf Tooth, Black Horse Frank Lightning, Old Bull, and my grandmother, Twin Woman. Each voice offered a unique piece of the story, and together their accounts could fill volumes. I also listened to Hanging Wolf, a warrior from that day who later became a dear friend. His honesty and vivid storytelling brought the events to life for me, as if I had been there. The victory dance and parade were only small parts of the many tales shared plenty. Crows had a captivating story about his brothers, Bob-tailed Bull and Little Soldier, who scouted for Custer during the battle. He only learned of their role years later. One of his brothers had a famous horse. While many speak of Comanche, the cavalry's surviving horse, the Indians had their own celebrated mount. This big pinto, trained to be loyal and obedient, was Bob-tailed Bull's companion. After Bob-tailed Bull was killed, the horse, though wounded, made its way back to the Urucara Reservation, a journey of many miles, earning the title of famous war horse. This horse became legendary, and a song was composed in its honor, sung during victory dances in both world wars. I sought out more details on the story, even obtaining a statement from an Urucara confirming the song's origin. In the aftermath of the battle, many Indians had left the field. By the time the remaining soldiers arrived, Lost Leg of Cheyenne returned days later in search of stray horses, but was driven back by the stench of the battlefield. They intended to explore further, but instead rejoined other Cheyennes near Rhino Creek. There would be no major fighting for the rest of that summer. I hope this account offers a new perspective on the Battle of Little Bighorn and the Great Sioux War of 1876. Keep an eye out for more videos with first-hand accounts. Until then, take care.